everybody, it is Wednesday, and today I want to go over the fingerprint mini lab that you guys did yesterday. See that up there? Okay. It was something you did at the very end of the hour. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. So you took your fingerprints, and then you answer these questions with your partner, and I just want to go over those answers and kind of have a discussion about them. So hopefully it wasn't too messy. Hopefully you didn't get ink anywhere on your body or your clothes other than just your fingertips. And then we were able to wash that off in the classroom. So you might have noticed that your fingerprints, some of them could have similar patterns, but they definitely have all sorts of crazy lines in them. So when we get to this very first question, it says, what do fingerprints have to do with DNA? And there could be lots of discussion here. I'm going to pull up, and I just want to look at some of these fingerprints here. All right, so on this slide, these are all sorts of different fingerprint patterns that we in the human species could have. And probably the most common one is these guys right here, the loops. Loops show up more than any other type of pattern. And if you're unique enough, then maybe you have some of these. All of these fall in the whorl family. My favorite fingerprint is this one right here, the double loop whorl. I love it. So you got whorls here, and you got loops here, and then over here you have arches. So the rarest fingerprint pattern that anybody could have is an accidental. So we have got billions of people on the planet, and basically everybody's fingerprints falls in one of these 8 patterns. So I don't know about you, I don't know if that sounds very unique and individual, but the truth of it is, can fingerprints be individual? Can they, or what do fingerprints have to do with DNA? Is when it comes to our fingerprints, despite the fact there's only 8 patterns, the lines that make up these patterns is what makes you unique. It's what makes your finger only trace back to you. Nobody else can have your exact same fingerprint lines. They might have the same fingerprint pattern. There's no way they're going to have the exact same lines, the exact same angle. Like you look here on this radial loop, you have what they call, it branches off. It's called the little bifurcation. So here it branches off, and look at the angle. It comes up. Oh, you got a little island right here. Okay, so they have unique lines making unique shapes. Even though the whole thing in general is a loop pattern, the lines that make it up is unique. So your fingerprints can only belong to you. Nobody else in the world can have them. It's impossible. Okay? And when you think of like crime scenes, if one fingerprint's left at a crime scene, can they match it back to a single person? Absolutely. Every single fingerprint could be used to ID directly back to you. Okay? So how does that relate to DNA? That's usually the easy part. People get that everybody's DNA is different. And we all have similar parts that make up our DNA, but the order that those parts are in is never, ever going to be the same as anybody else. So fingerprints and DNA, they're both unique. They're both individual. Nobody else can have your DNA, and nobody else can have your fingerprints. All right, the next question. Well, okay, just talk about, can someone else have your fingerprints? And this is where people ask me all the time, well, what about like identical twins? Even identical twins could have similar patterns. Like maybe every single finger pattern is a arch. And then my identical twin, every single fingerprint pattern is an arch. But regardless, if all of the patterns are the exact same, it goes back to those individual lines. Nobody can have the exact same individual lines making up the same patterns. So can somebody have identical fingerprints as you? No. No way. Impossible. I guess they're doing something really graphic and doing skin grafts and removing somebody's finger entirely and putting it on. But that would be the only way you could fake that. All right, so the last question says, do animals actually have fingerprints? And that's where this picture comes into play. There's very few species that have fingerprints like us. And the chimpanzee, the gorilla, of course. The other one is a koala. And the koala is the most similar to us because their finger shape and the angles and the size of the shape is really similar to the human finger. And so they're really the only species that could have it. But there's other things. If we look here, like a cat. So maybe cats don't necessarily have fingerprints because they got the paws and the fur and the padding all over it, but they have other ways that can uniquely identify them. And in their case, it's like the nose. So all cats have their own different unique nose pattern. So it just depends on what species it is. But every single species out there has some way uniquely to identify it. But when it comes to the human race, we have DNA that can identify us. We've got our fingerprints that can identify us. And that's kind of the correlation between those two. Okay, so hopefully you have this all filled out. You got your ink prints in there. You got these 3 questions filled in. So now we're going to go up here. And I am not a big movie person, which is funny because you're going to be watching videos every day, basically for the next 2 weeks. But this is one of the videos that I love to show. It's really one of my only videos that I'll be showing you this trimester. It's like an emotional roller coaster. So it starts off and there's this guy. He looks just like Mario. And he's quirky and funny, and he kind of just explains what his passion is. And then you get into right about here. You start hitting to like number 6. And this is where it gets a little sad. So, I don't know, like 20 minutes in the video, it's like a heartbreaker. And I have a hard time watching it and not getting emotional every time I see it. And then you get a little further down in the show, and it goes back to being like quirky and cheesy. And so it's just this like emotional roller coaster you're going to go on. But it does an amazing job of taking you through the video. So what you're doing here is watching the video, and then you were just filling in the blanks as you hear that information relayed. It is word for word exactly the way it's written is the way that you'll hear it in the movie. So enjoy the movie. You will not get through the entire thing. You may get down to number 14, 15, somewhere in there. But that's good. That's as far as you really need to go. So you only have today to watch as much as you can. And like I said, enjoy the emotional roller coaster.